Now, there's considerable diversity in organic and inorganic materials found in admixture with the cell polymers and in the cell lumina, which is collectively called extractives. Now, cell lumina, if you look closely at a cell, so this is your cell, the most outer part is the cell wall, and then we have different organelles inside the cells. The cell lumina is anything that is inside the cell wall here, which includes all the organelles. This is your cell lumina. Cell lumina. Okay, so that is the matrix or the jelly-like matrix inside the cell wall. That is your cell lumina. Now, inside your cell lumina, we can find some organic or inorganic substances, such as what we call extractives. So, extractives are inorganic substances that is most abundant in trees. Example of common extractives are what we call resins. What other? We have saps. The sap, resin is kind of sap. We have resins, saps, or anything that is extracted within the cells of plants. So those are extractives, and mostly they are inorganic substances. Now, extractives impart special properties to many kinds of wood. Wood also contain carrying amounts of water in liquid and vapor form. Now, why is it extractive is very important in wood? So, since wood is composed of a number of cells, of millions of cells, now extractive plays a very important role in preserving the wood. We have extractives. Not all wood produces a lot of extractives. And there are certain extractives that helps wood protect. We protect the wood from wood destroying organisms. Wood destroying organisms. Common example of those wood destroying organisms we have common is insects. We have the beetles and mostly larvae of most insects, and then we have included is the termites. Aside from insects, we have most common wood destroying organisms. We have termites and fungi, and of course we have other marine borers. Now, what is the role of extractives again? So extractives, they play a very important role in the natural durability of wood. Now, there are certain wood species that is susceptible to the attack of organisms. All wood is susceptible to the attack of wood-destroying organisms. Why? Because wood is, as I mentioned earlier, that wood is composed of sugar components, which is cellulose. Now, cellulose is sugar because it is composed of glucose. Now, this glucose is the food of wood-destroying organisms. This is the food of, example, fungi. Without extractives, most wood-destroying organisms can easily penetrate the cell wall and eat the cellulose in the wood, which makes the wood mga dalirang malata, mga busto timong kahoy, because of this wood-destroying organisms slowly eating the cell wall, or the cellulose, the sugar component of the cell wall, which is the cellulose and hemicellulose. But some species have a lot of extractives in it that protects the wood from wood-destroying organisms. Example of the species is Mulave. We have Mulave, Vitex parviflora. Mulave is a known wood which has natural durability. Even if you don't treat the wood, you don't put that in a kiln dryer, or you do not put some chemical preservatives in it, it has natural durability which protects it from wood-destroying organisms. Dili basta-basta maka-attract ka ang imong mga fungi, ang imong mga insects sa wood. That is why Mulave is very sought after in making railroad ties. Railroad, kanang sa atong ang mga tren, release ng tren, ang gingamit ang kahoy paghimuan ng mga release sa tren are Mulave. They are untreated, but even if you have how many decades worth of use ang imong railroad ties that is made up of Mulave, it's still very durable. Okay, that's why it's sought after. It's a sought after tree. Now moving on, we have that the chemical components of the cell wall can be classified arbitrarily as primary and secondary. Now, we have the cell wall is composed of primary component, primary, and then we have the secondary component of the cell. Secondary cell wall. These are the cell. This is the cell wall component. Cell wall components. The primary and secondary. Now, primary components basically establish the chemical and the physical feature of the cell wall. Now, the most important single component is the cellulose. Now, for the primary component, the most important single component is the cellulose, which makes up 60 to 70% of the cell wall. Then we have the hemicellulose and lignin. So what I discussed earlier. Hemicellulose and lignin. Now, the secondary components are not essential components in the organization of the wood, but their presence profoundly influences much of the physical and chemical behavior of wood. Now, the secondary components includes extractives and other inorganic substances in wood. Extractives and other inorganic substances. Other inorganic substances in wood. Substance in wood. Now, they are not essential. Now, the primary components of the cell wall, without these primary components, you cannot make, or cell wall is not made. It's very important that you have the cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin in your cell wall for your cell wall to become part of the wood. While secondary components, it could be present or it could not be present, but some of the presence of the secondary components improves the physical and the chemical structure of the wood. Just like what I said earlier, that for Mulave, they have a special extractives found in the cell lumina of the cell walls of Mulave that makes it naturally durable from wood-destroying organisms. Well, some of wood species, like ang atong ipil-ipil, di ba? If you look at the kakawate, or atong ipil-ipil, or kakawate, atong madrikakaw, or kakawate, we look at if you cut the cross-section of the stem of kakawate, you can find in the center na nagitawag na itong subok, or the pith. Now, the pith is usually the portion of the stem where starch is being stored for food or future food reserve sa atong kahoy, sa atong kakawate. Now, this is very humot kayo na para sa atong mga wood-destroying organisms. Mo nang ang atong mga kakawate, mga ipil-ipil, dali lang isa, bukbukon. Kaya ang mga bukbuk, mo man ang paborito nila, starch, the sugar component. And they don't have those natural durability compared to mga hardwood species. Now, So we continue. We will talk about the polysaccharide fraction of the cell wall. Now, when you hear the word polysaccharide, poly, you break it down again. Etymologically speaking, polysaccharide comes from poly, which means many. Saccharide means sugar. So when you say polysaccharide, that means many sugar. And in our case, monomers of sugar, we have different monomers of sugar. When you say monomers, that is the basic building blocks of sugar. We have different monomers of sugar. The most common, we have glucose. Some of these terms, nakakaagi naman eh. We have glucose. We have lactose. Glucose can be found in most plants. Cell wall is the product of photosynthesis. We have lactose, is common in milk. We have fructose, which is the common sugar in your fruits, and many more. Now, these are monomers. When you say monomers again, sa ako discussion kanina, this is the basic structural unit of sugar. Structural unit of sugar molecule. Which means, dili na ninimo siya pwedeng ma-divide. Okay? Compared sa polysaccharide, which means poly means many, saccharide means sugar. Pasabutan na that molecule is composed of many sugar monomers. It could be composed of many glucose units, or lactose units, or fructose units. In our case, when we talked about the cell wall, this is composed of cellulose, which is polysaccharide that's composed of many glucose units. Okay? Now, the cell wall, sa akong gidiscuss kanina, is a polysaccharide which is composed of primary component, the primary component of the cell wall, which is the cellulose, and then we have hemicellulose, and lastly we have lignin. This is the primary component. Now, out of that three component, we group the primary component into two. Cellulose and hemicellulose is collectively called as holocellulose. Holocellulose. So, the collective term for cellulose and hemicellulose, these are the sugar components, is holocellulose. Now, holocellulose, holo, means ang katibukan or sa tawagan na ang katibukan or ang general niya, general. Well, cellulose is the sugar component. So, all the sugar component in the cell wall is called holocellulose. Now, holocellulose is a generic term which can be subdivided into two specific sugar units in the cell wall, which is cellulose and hemicellulose. And lastly, lignin is, since lignin is not a sugar component of the cell, it is separated as its own entity. Okay, again, when you hear the word polysaccharide, poly means many, saccharide means sugar. So we talked about the sugar component, sugar units in the fraction of the cell wall. Now we look at the three main primary components of the cell wall, the cellulose and hemicellulose. Now they are collectively called as holocellulose, while lignin is a separate entity. Okay?